So you are still listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, Tom Edwards and James Jones. More conversation about Said Benrahma this week and his contribution against Arsenal. It was the same conversation after Manchester United last week. I'm delighted to say that Jacob Steinberg, football journalist and West Ham fan for his sins from The Guardian, is joining us again on the We Are West Ham podcast. Jacob, it's brilliant to have you with us. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to come on the podcast once again. Your conversation, your tweets last week caused quite the debate between Tom and I. I was 100% Team Steinberg, while Tom was on the other end. As far as Said Benrahma goes, you tweeted out among a thread, one thing that really hit home with me was that Said Benrahma and a lot of people have a view on Benrahma that is different to his actual on-field play suggests. What is has that changed at all, or can you give us a bit more detail about that at first and your stance on him?
Well, I think that it was a little bit obvious to me back in October that Said Benrahma wasn't David Moyes' top choice. I think if he'd had the time back, he may well have gone for Josh King at Bournemouth, and maybe also looking with the benefit of hindsight, given what Josh King has gone on to do, not really done anything for Bournemouth before he left and went to Everton. Maybe that's a signing that might not have worked out. Equally, it could be that's something that just didn't suit him. And if he joined West Ham in October, that he may well have made a huge difference. And when Antonio got injured, he may well have been a player who really would have made more of a difference up front than Sebastian Haller did. And indeed, if we'd had someone like that, perhaps it would have been an even stronger position that we're looking at now. They might be sort of clear of Chelsea. So I'm not sure for a start whether Benrahma was somebody who quite fitted into what Moyes wanted to do. That isn't to say that I didn't think that he was himself, taken in isolation, a good player. He clearly had done very well in the Championship with Brentford. There were other clubs who did have a look at him. The Palace had a look. Villa had a bit of a look as well. I think where I come from it, though, is that £30 million for Said Benrahma I thought was really quite a big fee for somebody who, really not proven at all in the Premier League, or absolutely no experience. West Ham didn't have a huge budget to play with last summer, so I thought that I raised my eyebrows a little bit at that. And I was, kind of some people would say to me, he's a very talented player, get him going and he'll make a big difference. There were others who were saying he won't make that much of a difference to the first team. And I think that from what we've seen so far, there'll be people obviously who'll argue, well, this is simply because Moyes hasn't really sort of let him off the leash. But I think I fall into the latter camp, which is that I don't think that he is he's someone who's made West Ham better. I don't think he's been a disaster by any means. I think he's had some good games here and there, but there are other times when you feel that he really sort of struggles with the physicality, the pace of the Premier League. I don't think necessarily he has the pace sometimes to get away from players, the strength. That infamous game against Palace where he gave the ball away 44 times or something. I thought, that night that sort of came after a good performance against Leeds, where people thought perhaps he'll push it on, but he didn't really that evening. I think with Moyes, it's been a case of him really trying to get this guy up to speed in the Premier League. Then you come to January, and obviously Haller goes. They don't sign a striker, but they do sign a player in Jesse Lingard, who proven in the Premier League, an international player. With England, semi-finals of the World Cup and everything, scored in cup finals for Manchester United. And he's someone who really, you can see the difference when he's playing in Benrahma's position. The levels of a player who's pushing, when you're pushing for Champions League, Europa League, there is a big difference there. I don't think that, Lingard can kind of get away with not tracking back as much when he's producing the output in the final third that we've seen from him so far. It's harder to justify with Benrahma. We saw it on Sunday, where obviously Arsenal overloaded West Ham's left side. It was an issue with the goals that Benrahma wasn't doing the work. And I thought that was why against Manchester United, when Moyes got a lot of, I thought, quite knee-jerk criticism out of that game, where obviously it was very negative. I ended up paying more attention to the episode of Sopranos that I was watching than the game itself because it's so dull. But I thought it was very conditioned by...
This is the Man U game, is it?
Yeah, last week, where there was a lot of expectation around what West Ham would do going into that game. Obviously, they then proceeded to do very little in an attacking sense, but I thought that's very conditioned by the loss of Pablo Fornals to injury, which I think has really hurt West Ham in both of those games against United and Arsenal, because they're somebody who really does work off the ball. He might not be as flashy, he might not be as exciting necessarily as Benrahma, but when it comes to what we all know with Moyes is that if you don't run, you don't play, which is something that all the players say about him. Fornals is somebody who very much, after a sticky start, really does do that, helps the team. He's been a big part of how they've been defensively solid this season. With Benrahma in the side, I think it's different. It's not to say that I'm part of this sort of, I have a massive vendetta against him. I just think I can see why Moyes in that game against United would be thinking, I don't know if I can trust him in this level of game where we don't have, especially where they didn't have Lingard as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're literally the bit you've just come in, and we all said the same thing. James made a good point saying that Fornals, we certainly miss him, particularly against those big teams. It was you tweeted. There's that's it. Moyes doesn't trust Benrahma, who did nothing after coming on with a lot of time left. I know we're skipping back to the United game. There's a view of Said Benrahma that doesn't tally with reality. Tom, me and you have spoken about this at length on the podcast this season, and it's fair to say that. You are, in my opinion, and perhaps one of the people who Jacob's tweet might have been inadvertently aimed at then, that I feel like sometimes your view of Benrahma doesn't tally with reality. What Jacob said there about Jesse Lingard and all of that, listening to it, for me, sounds quite hard to argue with. Have you got, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they play different positions. Benrahma's had that role once in the 10 dog against Leeds, and I'd say that's arguably our best attacking performance creatively since before Lingard came in. That is, obviously since then we've played some stellar games, and Lingard is a level above, absolutely. But Benrahma plays out wide, so they're slightly different anyway. Their contribution to the team is a bit different. I think you're looking for different roles from them anyway. They can both play at the same time. I don't think it's one or the other. And then the other one is Benrahma's stats with him. I know you mentioned there you think we're less solid, or is that, whatever that is, an eye test or anything. The stats suggest that we've won 10 out of the 12 games he started, or 10 out of 13 on the weekend, and we've only lost one and we've drawn the other. So our results with him as in the starting 11 have been significantly better than without. And I think he's got there's a reason why he's started so slow. He's been in and out the side. He hasn't had a crack at it. Like I said earlier on a previous section, I think it's 4 starts in a row is his most amount of game time. And I'm not one of those who sat here saying he's going to score 10, 15, 20 goals, but I definitely think he has. And I definitely think we've shown this season we're better grateful when he's on. He's got a lot more to do. He's got a lot more to offer, but I do think that the slander against him, which is coming from certain sections of fans or media or whatever, is probably over the top, because just go back a year ago and what he was doing in the Championship, there's a serious player in there, and he's shown elements of it at us. So to give up on him after 8 months when he's also contributed so heavily to a team who's come 5th, be that from his position on the squad coming off, he's won us key games with things he's done off the bench, the Villa, Fulham, 2 match-winning assists from moments of quality from him. So he's definitely added to it. And I think the slander against him or the dismissive nature against him that he's not a Premier League player is definitely too early. We've seen that time and time again, that you can't write a player off after 7-8 months. And I'm not saying
I think he's
sorry.
I mean, I think he's a Premier League player. I think he's easily good enough to play in the Premier League. Where I think there's an issue with him is, I mean, just to touch on the couple of the assists you mentioned. I mean, I'd argue that the Fulham one was relatively simple, and I thought the Villa one was a little bit lucky and made by a very good piece of improvisation from Bowen. What I will give him is a one that you didn't mention, which was the very good pass to Souček against Villa away. which is what I would like to see from him all the time. You know, I'm less interested in the skill, which is what I'm not sure what this team is really about. I'm more just about the quick incisiveness in the final third, and I think that's probably what Moyes is looking for. I think he's a Premier League player. I think what the issue is he a £30 million player that West Ham needed when they, you know, obviously it's that whole question about recruitment, isn't it? Where they'd spent the entire summer chasing centre back after centre back, and then come the end of it, suddenly out of nowhere, Dawson comes in on loan, and okay, he has turned out to be, you know, a great signing, which a lot of fans didn't think would be the case.
Us included, for sure.
Yeah. I think people were very dubious about that. And 30 million on Benrahma, which obviously at the same time he was coming in to replace Grady Diangana. So you know, there's an element of the finances that you question. You know, Grady going for 18, and okay, again, there was a huge reaction about him going at the time, which again maybe feels a little bit over the top. He's not really done anything, but also at the same time, you know, then to go and spend all that money on Benrahma, I question how much better he is than Grady. Exactly how much, you know, that's really affected the squad. And when we come to the sort of final half hour against Arsenal, and we come to the United game, could that money have been reinvested in a better way, in strengthening key positions that, you know, really have ended up hurting them? You know, I'm not so sure how much Benrahma has contributed to them being fifth. Again, not saying that he's done nothing, but I think the best team probably doesn't include him in it. I think it's, you know, the best attack is probably Fornals, Lingard, Bowen, and behind Antonio, isn't it?
Yeah, I think.
Bowen can be disposed at points. So I was just going to say, I think we've got all three. I think that's a luxury. I don't think certain games, certain courses for certain horses. I think we've got four very different players out there who each bring something unique. So I think it is horses for courses, but I can't argue with that as a front three. No.
I mean, I think that one of the sorry, I just think one of the issues that you get with the West Ham sort of need to move away from is this idea around the kind of luxury indulgent player that, you know, we all kind of love. We all watched, if we're all of a certain age, then we all would have sort of grown up watching Di Canio, Berkovic, all those kind of players, and they were all great and everything. Di Canio was also a player who never turned up for away games and sort of walked out on the team when they were going down. You know, similarly, there's the whole thing around, you know, 2016, everybody loved Payet, and you know, it was fantastic, but it was all kind of built on a house of sand. Whereas
Yossi Benayoun was a good one for that.
Yeah. I thought Benayoun worked a bit harder than maybe the two players I've mentioned. But I think with Moyes, it's trying to get away from that a little bit, and, you know, not focusing on just somebody who can do something out of nothing. It's you know, it's focusing on a team where everybody's kind of working and being effective, which I think he felt. I remember talking to him last year and asking him, when you managed against West Ham for Everton, did you think they were a bit of a soft touch? And he said, yeah.
I mean, that's dope. You mentioned Moyes there. You've done my linking for me, which I appreciate. But you similar stance from you last week, and I think something you tweeted out after the game. There was after United game. This is that you find the abuse that Moyes gets. Correct me if I'm paraphrasing here, but pathetic, I think was the word you used. And I think last week I was of the opinion that a pragmatic approach at Old Trafford was perfectly sensible. Yes, it brought up a turgid game of football, but we lost by the odd own goal at a team who are likely to finish second in the league. So I don't think there was too much shame in that. My stance shifted somewhat at the Arsenal game, and I think Moyes deserves probably more criticism for that, in my opinion, given that after you're 3-0 up, to not be able to hold on to that, albeit against a team who had some talented players like Arsenal, Odegaard, Lacazette, and Chambers obviously played well, but I think to just sort of invite them on was sort of criminal, really. But what's your stance on as far as the Moyes stuff goes? Because West Ham Twitter, you'll know, as much, probably more than some of us. I'm trying to think of an appropriate adjective. What a emotive place it can be at times, particularly around David Moyes. And you got a bit of kickback about the abuse that Moyes was getting, or the criticism he was getting after United. Tom Edwards was one of those. What's your stance on David Moyes, and particularly, you know, the grief that he gets and doesn't get after certain games this season?
Well, I suppose in the to declare an interest would be that I didn't see Sunday's game, so I can't comment on exactly what happened in a tactical sense, because I was at Chelsea v Sheffield United and
fair enough.
Was walking around Fulham Broadway Sainsbury's listening to the game on the radio, waiting for Arsenal to equalise. Why? After the Chelsea game. So the only thing I'd say about the Arsenal game is that I'm looking at West Ham's bench and thinking, well, I don't see a lot there, which is, you know, an issue that isn't really created by David Moyes. I think it's a long list of reasons for that.
It is if the club are to be believed, Jacob, isn't it? That it was David Moyes' decision not to spend any more money in the summer, and it was very much these are David's decisions.
Right. I think that one of the things that we've got to, again, look at is that I think David Moyes has quite a good understanding of, I think at times he has almost a better understanding of West Ham as an outsider than at times people looking from the inside do, in that he's talking all the time about, you need to maybe calm down and, you know, not get ahead of yourselves. And sort of, there's been times in the past, I think the classic one would be 2016, where, you know, they go close to qualifying for the Champions League. But if we're honest, like, how lucky was that season under Slaven Bilic? It was fairly lucky. They go into the next season, they don't spend it. Well, they don't into the London Stadium, don't really buy anybody who's any use at all, and you know, and it all falls apart basically. That's what he's trying to avoid. It's about trying to lay, you know, foundations in there. And if players, okay, if he's got money to spend, but the players aren't there in a particularly dead pandemic hit market, then, you know, do West Ham need more players who are going to sit around on big contracts, which is, you know, the issue for them last summer, when it's a real struggle to shift people like Yarmolenko, Lanzini, Felipe Anderson, on big contracts. Anderson's on I think he's the highest paid player at the club. He's on a very big contract. And, you know, you would like to be able to sell him to get back some of the money you paid for him. Instead, he's gone on loan. That's not money that can really be reinvested in the squad. So, you know, with the Arsenal game, I'd say, look at what Arsenal were bringing on. Look what Moyes was bringing on. Yeah, maybe people were saying he should have brought on Ben Johnson for, you know, instead of Ryan Fredericks to try and shut down the left flank. But we are still talking about a 21-year-old, pretty inexperienced academy player compared to, you know, these sort of brilliant little Arsenal attackers who are coming on.
Yeah, Nicolas Pepe, 72 million who came on, yeah.
I know, yeah, and obviously people will have their view on Pepe. He's not really, you know, Arsenal fans don't really like him. But point I'm making is that maybe there's every chance that the other substitution that Moyes is making there may well not get them out of get them over the line. You know, it's we're not talking about really established players who are coming into that. I just think that to me there seems to be a resistance at times. I think that I get the impression that some people are waiting for it to fall apart. I think the first time I found myself in a similar kind of position of trying to defend Moyes, I think that again there was a bit of look at the squad that he took over in 2017, the squad, you know, and look at the state of the squad after the January 2018 window, where, you know, they sold loads of players, didn't really bring anybody in. Patrice Evra is coming in on a free transfer after the window. He's sort of walking around, but at the end with like one senior defender basically in Ogbonna getting them over the line. You know, Antonio was injured the whole time, wasn't he? And they stay up. And I thought at that point, you know, that sort of that final game, if you remember, against Everton, and okay, it was against Sam Allardyce's Everton, you could kind of see something coming together almost, especially equally that the win over Leicester, which kind of kept them up a week before. And instead there was just this resistance and the desire to go for the big name in Pellegrini, the big expensive manager. And he turned out to be just completely the wrong man. He wasted a lot of money. His picks were terrible. the players who he turned down, such as James Maddison, it really kind of beggars belief. Roberto was a complete disaster. And they lost 2 or 3 years because they kind of went chasing the fantasy crowd-pleasing manager instead of sticking with somebody who could build from there. And I just think that I personally worry that they'll get to a stage where will he be driven out and will they regret it? I hope that if it comes to that they're able to replace him with somebody better than Pellegrini, and it can be somebody who can take the club on. But you can't necessarily have too much confidence about that.
No, that's it.
Jacob, but I'm interested to see where you stand in the whole when fans are back at West Ham, the West Ham of old will return debate. You hear it a lot in the media from a lot of pundits. I think Merson alluded to it in the studio on Sunday that the reason why West Ham are doing so well is because the stadium's empty and the fans aren't getting on their backs, and it kind of is almost linked to what we were just saying about that there might be sections of the fan base that are kind of half waiting for it to all fall down. Do you agree with that stance? Personally, I think it's quite a lazy view, and it kind of is a little bit harsh on the work that David Moyes has done this season.
I think that if they'd have fans in the stadium on Sunday, and there's no real way to prove this, it's I could just be coming up with a wild theory, is that they probably hold out, and that Arsenal, if you think about what the atmosphere might have been like at 3-0, if you think of what the Arsenal away end probably would have been like at that stage, do you necessarily see Arsenal coming back? Do you see them composing themselves? I'm not so sure. I think they may well have just carried on getting more and more intense, and you probably see an empty away end at half time, and it's different. But there's a bit of a weirdness to these games. At times it can feel like a training game at certain stages. So you can kind of settle yourself and take a bit of a moment, and you don't have a crowd on your back. The crowd obviously makes a difference. So perhaps in that environment, then it can make a difference. I think that if West Ham had all those fans behind them, perhaps they would have got over the line. What I have heard is that there's a feeling within the squad that it's helped them, because it's helped them overall across the season not to have fans there, which isn't to say because the fans will get on their back. It's more because it's enabled them to play this style of football, which is they're not kind of being urged out of shape in a way. They're not being urged to go in. When you've got a crowd there, you're kind of being pushed on to make a big tackle and stuff like that. In this setting, they're much more able to hold their shape and frustrate teams. And I think that sort of again feeds back into a wider point about Moyes, which is that this team is comfortable playing in this kind of cautious way a lot of the time and kind of picking their moments when to attack. And then at the same time, you get people, I look at people saying, why doesn't he just go for it? Why don't, well, they generally don't really go for it. They play in quite a cautious way, and then they hit teams when they think that they're ready to do so. I look at it and saying, well, why didn't you just go for it against Liverpool? And you kind of think, well, I think
Lucky
they had a plan for
last
that
week,
game.
Jacob. These two didn't start. We should have just gone for it at Man United. You would have loved it.
Well, I think that we have to be realistic about how good the teams are that they're playing. They need to be realistic about how good these teams are. If Liverpool decide to turn up on the one day when they do, you're going to be in trouble. If Arsenal's very good players decide to stop being idiots, then they're going to be in trouble. And again, against Manchester United, they specifically want you to come at them. And look at what happened when West Ham chased the game. United almost scored 2 or 3 more, didn't they?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, Jacob, that one won't have gone down well, but you can definitely come on again with stances like that, and it might not just be me shouting into the void as it usually is. But look, it's been absolutely brilliant, Jacob, having you on. We do appreciate you giving up some of your time. Just quickly before you go then, how do you think it's going to play out for the rest of the season? These hopes of Europe, James said earlier on in the show that he doesn't feel games like that are going to define the season. I disagree again, thinking the stage we're at and the teams we're coming up against, it 100% does. These are exactly the games that will define whether this season just turns out to be a pretty good one and a nice improvement on last year and we finish 9th, or wow, this is absolutely something else and one we'll remember for a long time. How do you see it playing out?
What is it? 9 games to go. So I've been expecting them to fall away for a while. I think everybody has, and they keep just surprising everybody. So I think that you've got to give them, I think we've sort of got to stick by and think, that this team now has earned the right sort of, for people to maybe expect a bit more from them in terms, not to doubt them. I think that top 4 will be tricky. My main job now is covering Chelsea, and they're transformed. If Chelsea still have Frank Lampard in charge, then I don't think they'd be 4th. I don't think they'd be anywhere near it. With a manager like Tuchel, then it's knowing what to do with world-class players and a world-class squad, which is far beyond that of West Ham. I'd be astonished if West Ham are capable of finishing above them. I do think that those drop points on Sunday will probably come back to haunt them. The other bit that maybe works with West Ham if they're going at it with Chelsea is that Chelsea are in the FA Cup semi-final. They've got Champions League quarter-final to play, which they may well win. So they're going to have a backlog of games. At the same time, they're only a point ahead of Spurs, and which in itself is kind of crazy when you think that they have Harry Kane and Son and Bale, and he's able to leave out players like Dele Alli, who would probably walk into West Ham's team. So
not ahead of Ben Rama,
done
incredibly.
No, of course not. But they've done incredibly to get this far. With if you just look at the individuals in the squad, and I think the belief, how much the lack of pressure on them probably does mean now that they're able to maybe keep going. They've got past quite a few difficult games, haven't they? So I don't think top 4, but I think that the Europa League or this sort of weird Europa Conference League is definitely possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jacob Steinberg from The Guardian there. We really appreciate you giving us so much of your time, Jacob. It's wonderful to hear your thoughts on all things West Ham, and hopefully we'll have you on again later on in the season to celebrate West Ham clinching Europe top 4 on the last day of the season with the Said Benrahma hat-trick. But
I would be very happy if that happens. I don't care if West Ham do well, and it's because of a player who I doubt.
Exactly, absolutely. Well, look, we really appreciate you giving us your time. Thanks a lot. Jacob Steinberg there, football journalist and West Ham supporter from The Guardian newspaper. Stay with us.